You open your eyes. The air is thick with salt, burnt powder, and the sweat of horses. It is the 18th of December, in the year of our Lord, 1793. You stand on a broken hillside above the port of Toulon. Young man, 24 years of age, thin of frame, with the unhurried accent of Corsica clinging to every French word you speak. The officers around you wear clean uniforms and carry maps they do not read. They call you the little artilleryman, if they call you anything at all, but you have seen what they have not. On the 17th, in the evening, you wrote in a scrap of paper, "Place the battery upon the height called Little Gibraltar. By dawn, the English fleet will have no refuge." No one obeyed you. So on the night of the 17th, you dragged the guns yourself, 40 cannons, up a mud-slick slope, in a rain that did not cease until morning. The horses broke their legs. The men cursed your name. You did not answer them. At first light, you gave the order. The first shot struck an English ammunition ship. The explosion rose like a column of judgment. By noon, the harbor was a furnace. The Republic made you a brigadier general. You were 24 years old, and for the first time, men whispered your name as though it were a sentence, not a question. On the 26th of March, 1796, you received command of the Army of Italy. You arrived at Nice on the 27th. What you found was not an army. It was a congregation of ghosts. Half the men had no shoes. No bread had been issued for 8 days. The cavalry had saddles without girths. The artillery had powder without cannonballs. Your predecessor, General Scherer, had written to the Directory, "This army is the dregs of the nation." On the 28th, you assembled them in the rain. You spoke only these words, "Soldiers, you are naked and hungry. I will lead you into the richest plains of the world. There you shall find honor, glory, and fortune." They did not cheer. They stared at you as men stare at water in a desert. On the 12th of April, you met the Austrians at Montenat. On the 13th, at Millesimo. On the 14th and 15th, at Dago. 4 battles in 4 days. Every one of them a victory. The Austrian general Beaulieu wrote afterward, "He is everywhere. He is nowhere. He is a fever dream." On the 10th of May, at the bridge of Lodi, you took a musket from a dead grenadier and walked to the front. The Austrian cannon had killed 40 men in the first volley. You did not flinch. You stood at the head of the column, the musket across your chest, and watched as your soldiers crossed the bridge under grape shot. That night, your men called you the little corporal, not in mockery, but in the way a child calls a father by his house name. You wrote to the Directory on the 11th, "We have beaten them. The road to Milan is open." On the 19th of May, 1798, you sailed from Toulon. Your destination was not written on any map given to the sailors. You carried with you 35,000 men, 400 transport ships, and 167 scholars, mathematicians, astronomers, poets, engravers. You told them, "We are bringing the Enlightenment to the Orient." On the 9th of June, you took Malta. It required 3 days. The Knights of St. John surrendered their ancient fortress without a single French casualty. You wrote in your journal, "The Knights have grown fat on revenues they did not earn. They do not know how to die." On the 1st of July, you landed near Alexandria. On the 2nd, you took the city. On the 21st, you met the Mameluke horsemen before the pyramids. There were 6,000 of them, mounted on Arabian horses, their robes billowing in the desert wind. You ordered your infantry into hollow squares. The Mamelukes charged 7 times. Each time they broke against French musket fire like waves against a cliff of granite. You said to your staff, "Soldiers 40 centuries look down upon you from the height of these pyramids." But on the 1st of August, Admiral Nelson found your fleet at Aboukir Bay. By midnight, 11 of your 15 ships of the line had been burned, sunk, or captured. You were trapped. Plague appeared in the garrison of Jaffa on the 10th of March, 1799. You visited the plague hospital. You touched the sores of the dying with your own hand. Then you ordered that the sick be evacuated on the same horses as the healthy, knowing that some would die on the road. You wrote, "I have done what is necessary. God will judge the rest." On the 22nd of August, 1799, you boarded a frigate called the Muron. You left the Army of the Orient behind. 45,000 French soldiers remained in Egypt without their general. You did not explain yourself. On the 9th of October, you landed at Frejus. The harbor was crowded with ships that flew the tricolor. As you walked onto the quay, the people did not ask about the army you had abandoned. They shouted, "He has returned. France is saved." On the 9th of November, the 18th Brumaire, by the new calendar, you entered the Council of 500. The deputies screamed, down with the dictator. One of them struck you. Your grenadiers cleared the hall with bayonets. That night, you wrote, "The revolution is finished. I am beginning the restoration, not of the Bourbons, but of order." On the 25th of December, you became first consul of the French Republic. You were 30 years old. On the 2nd of December 1804, you crowned yourself Emperor of the French. The ceremony took place in Notre Dame de Paris. Pope Pius V had traveled across the Alps to place the crown upon your head. But when the moment came, you turned. You took the crown from the Pope's hands. You placed it on your own head. The Pope did not protest. He had seen the premonition in your eyes. On the 21st of March 1804, you had enacted the Code Civil. In the years that followed, it would be called the Napoleonic Code. It abolished feudalism. It guaranteed freedom of conscience. It made the law the same for the rich man and the poor man. You said of it, "My true glory is not the 40 battles I have won. Waterloo will erase the memory of all those victories, but this code will live forever." On the 2nd of December 1805, 1 year to the day after your coronation, you stood on the Pratzen Heights in Moravia. Below you, the combined armies of Russia and Austria, 85,000 men, moved through the morning fog. On the 27th of November, you had written to your brother Joseph, "In 8 days, I shall give battle. I shall destroy the enemy. Do not worry. It will be over before Christmas." You had made yourself appear weak. On the 1st of December, you ordered your right wing to abandon the high ground. Your soldiers retreated in full view of the enemy. The Tsar's adjutant saw it. The Allies descended from the hills into the valley. At 9 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd, you released Soult's corps from the fog. The rising sun burned away the mist. The French divisions climbed the Pratzen Heights in 3 columns. By noon, the Russian Imperial Guard had been broken. By 1 o'clock, the frozen ponds behind the enemy lines had cracked under the weight of fleeing Russians. Thousands drowned. At 4 o'clock, the Tsar himself fled the field. The Austrian Emperor Francis came to your headquarters and asked for an armistice. You wrote that night, "This battle has killed the Holy Roman Empire. I have given France a new son." On the 2nd of May 1808, the people of Madrid rose against the French garrison. You had placed your brother Joseph on the Spanish throne. You had believed the Spanish would welcome liberation from their Bourbon king. They did not. On the 3rd of May, French firing squads executed hundreds of civilians in the hills outside the city. Francisco Goya would paint that scene 30 years later. The white shirt of the man about to die, the lantern light on the upturned faces. On the 19th of July, at Bailen, General Dupont surrendered his entire corps of 20,000 men. It was the first time a Napoleonic army had laid down its arms in open field. You wrote to your Minister of War, "The name of Dupont will be a curse upon the lips of French soldiers for 100 years. You were right. On the 24th of June 1812, you crossed the Niemen River. You commanded the largest army Europe had ever assembled, 600,000 men, 1,400 cannon, 180,000 horses. You said to your staff, "I go to finish the work of Charles XII. Alexander will beg for peace at my feet." On the 15th of August, your birthday, you celebrated in a farmhouse outside Smolensk. The Russians had burned the city themselves. The streets were empty. The churches were cold. On the 7th of September, you fought the Battle of Borodino. It was the bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars. 70,000 men fell dead or wounded between sunrise and sunset. You said, "The battle was terrible. The Russians showed themselves invincible in their obstinacy." On the 14th of September, you entered Moscow. You expected the city to greet you as a conqueror. Instead, at midnight, the fire began. The Russians had set their own capital ablaze. For 3 days, the fire spread. 3/4 of Moscow burned to the ground. Wooden houses, churches, warehouses. The Great Kremlin itself scorched black. You waited 5 weeks for the Tsar to negotiate. He did not answer. On the 19th of October, you ordered the retreat. The snow began on the 6th of November. On the 9th, the temperature fell to -20 degrees Réaumur, -25 Celsius. The horses died standing. The men fell asleep in the snow and did not wake. On the 28th of November, you crossed the Berezina River on 2 makeshift bridges. The Russians attacked during the crossing. The bridges collapsed. 10,000 men drowned or were trampled into the ice. On the 5th of December, you abandoned the remains of the army. You rode south in a sleigh toward Paris. 40,000 men, at most, returned from the 600,000 who had crossed the Niemen in June. On the 11th of April 1814, you signed your abdication at Fontainebleau. The Treaty of the 4th of May gave you the island of Elba. 20,000 inhabitants, a palace of 2 floors, a navy of 1 brig. You said to the commissioners, "I have not ceased to serve France. I will serve her again." They did not believe you. On the 26th of February, 1815, you boarded the brig Inconstant. You had with you 600 guardsmen, 4 cannons, and a library of 200 books. On the 1st of March, you landed at Gulf 1 on the French coast. On the 7th of March, a battalion of the King's army was sent to arrest you. You walked alone toward their muskets. You opened your greatcoat and said, "If any soldier among you wishes to shoot his emperor, I am here." They threw down their cartridges and shouted, "Vive l'Empereur!" You marched to Paris without firing a single shot. King Louis XVIII fled to Belgium. Your reign of the 100 Days had begun. On the 12th of June, you left Paris for Belgium. On the 16th, you struck the Prussian army at Ligny. The Prussians retreated with the loss of 20,000 men. You sent Marshal Grouchy with 33,000 men to follow them. You told Grouchy, "Do not lose sight of them, they are broken." Then you turned to face the English on the morning of the 18th of June, 1815. You stood on a low ridge near the village of Waterloo. The rain had fallen all night. You delayed the attack until noon to let the ground dry. That delay, you would later write in your memoirs, cost me the battle, the campaign, and the crown. At 11:30, you ordered the attack. For 4 hours, the French infantry climbed the ridge toward the English redcoats. At 4 o'clock, the cavalry charged. Your cuirassiers overran the English cannons, but they had no hammers with which to spike the guns. The English gunners returned to their batteries and fired into the backs of your retreating horsemen. At 6 o'clock, you looked east. You were waiting for Grouchy. Instead, you saw a column of dark uniforms moving along the far ridge. Prussian blue. General Blücher had not retreated. He had marched through the night to join Wellington. You said to your chief of staff, "This is the end." At 7 o'clock, you sent forward your last reserve, the Imperial Guard. 5 battalions of the oldest, bravest soldiers in Europe. They marched up the slope to the sound of drums. The English infantry waited behind a sunken road. At 30 paces, the English guards rose from the hedge and fired a single volley. The old guard broke. For the first time in 20 years, Napoleon's elite soldiers ran. Someone in the ranks shouted, "The guard retreats. Sauvekeeper, save yourself." You did not run. You stood in a square of your remaining guardsmen until your aide seized your bridle and dragged you from the field. On the 22nd of June, you abdicated for the 2nd time. You wrote, "The political state of France requires a chief. I have offered my services. They have been refused. I therefore abdicate." On the 15th of July, 1815, you boarded the British ship Bellerophon. You surrendered yourself to Captain Maitland. You hoped for exile in England. You had read of the Earl of Lauderdale's estate in the Scottish lowlands. You imagined writing your memoirs beside a quiet river. Instead, on the 7th of August, the British government sent you to Saint Helena, a volcanic rock in the South Atlantic, 1,900 miles from any continent. Rain falls there on 280 days of every year. The wind never stops. You arrived on the 17th of October. Your quarters were Longwood House, a damp, single-story building with leaking ceilings and mold on the walls. Your jailer was Sir Hudson Lowe, a man of small rank and smaller imagination. Lowe searched your letters. He forbade your doctors from treating you without his permission. He cut your expenses while the British government spent £40,000 a year keeping you locked away. On the 11th of April, 1821, you wrote your last will. "I wish my ashes to rest on the banks of the Seine, among the French people I have loved so well." On the 3rd of May, you received the last sacraments. On the 5th of May, a Saturday, the storm raged outside Longwood. The wind shook the windows. The rain came in sheets. Your last words were spoken in delirium. France, Army, head of the army, Josephine. You died at 5:49 in the evening. You were 51 years old. 19 years later, on the 15th of December 1840, your remains were returned to Paris. The funeral procession moved from the Arc de Triomphe to the Invalides. The temperature had fallen below freezing. The Seine was filled with broken ice. 300,000 Frenchmen lined the streets in silence. No one spoke. No one sang. No one cheered. King Louis-Philippe had ordered that your coffin be placed beneath the dome of the Invalides. The inscription above your tomb reads simply, "Napoleon." You who are listening, you have now lived his life in the span of an afternoon. You have felt his hunger at Lodi, his impatience before Moscow, his despair at Waterloo. You have seen what he saw: the gilded palace and the stolen baggage train, the cross erected over a battlefield, and the body of a boy lieutenant carried past on a stretcher. Now, close your eyes. It is the 18th of 1793, again. The rain is falling on Toulon. The cannons are in place. The ammunition ship is waiting in the harbor. You are 24 years old, and the battery is yours to command. What will you do? Thank you for listening. This is your legend. In our next letter, you will become another soul from the cairn of history. Subscribe and live the legend.